This afternoon's session is our first in a series of webinars that we'll be offering on the Common Core, and this one is entitled PARCC101. We're pleased to have you join us for this session. I'd like to welcome our speaker this afternoon, Mr. Doug Sovde from Achieve. Mr. Sovde is the Director of PARCC Instructional Supports and Educational Engagement, and he is responsible for leading all educator engagement work through the PARCC Supplemental Grant. He's also a leading authority in Common Core state standards and is responsible for creating Appendix A to the Mathematics Standards, also known as Model Course Pathways in Mathematics. What you don't know about Doug, and what I certainly appreciate, is that he has such a strong practitioner background. He's been a mathematics teacher and a leader in district-wide curriculum development. He's also been an assistant principal at Bellevue High School and Sammamish High School in Washington State, where he supervised and supported the mathematics curriculum development. In 2006, Doug became the principal of Chinook Middle School, where he managed the development of new curriculum in math, science, and social studies. We are so honored to have Mr. Sovde give us his time and his experience this afternoon, and I am very pleased to ask you to take over, Doug.
Okay, thank you very much, Honor, and welcome everybody this afternoon to our conversation about Common Core State Standards implementation in the PARCC content frameworks. I have to admit, listening to that bio started giving me flashbacks, so I had to breathe deeply for a moment, remembering all of my fun times working in the Bellevue School District. It is a great honor and a great pleasure to get to talk with all of you today, and I guess I'd actually like to start by extending thanks to all of you for the work that you do in our schools. Having been in your shoes a little while ago now, but still having some strong memories about it, I know just how important it is, and what, how grateful I and many others are for the work that you do. So with that, I think I'll go ahead and get started with the presentation. Let's see. Because we are an assessment consortium, I always like to start with a little bit of formative assessment. So we have arranged a series of 3 questions for you, and with the wonders of webinars, I'm actually going to launch this first question, which is really, how much do you know about the Common Core State Standards? I asked the question because as I go through the webinar, knowing where your comfort level is with the standards and a few other things will help me in terms of making sure I'm hitting the right points for you as we go along. So I'm going to hit this launch button that you can't see, but you will see the poll pop up a moment or two after that. And I'm going to give you about 30 seconds to respond to it. 5 means you're feeling very comfortable with the standards, they sit on your nightstand every night, and 1 means you really don't know much about them yet. So I'll launch that poll right now and give you all 30 seconds to respond to it. About 5 more seconds. All right, I'm going to close this poll and share the results with all of you.
Great. Doug, I am going to be tell you what the results show. It looks like 49% of our participants have some knowledge of PARCC, 6% have no knowledge, and 36 have average knowledge, and 10% have more than average knowledge.
Great. That's very helpful to know. We're going to be spending a little bit of time actually talking about the standards today, particularly as they are brought to life to a certain extent through the content frameworks that were developed by the PARCC states. So it's very helpful to know. Thanks, everybody. Let's move on to the next question, which is, how much do you know about PARCC? So first question was about the standards. Second question is actually about how much you know about PARCC. So I will bring up Let's see. You know what? I did that in the wrong order. That first one.
Yeah, wrong order. So it should be the CCS, yeah.
Yeah, so I'll ask you how much you know about the Common Core State Standards since we already talked about PARCC. So here you go. 30 seconds on the standards, and I'm going to change the slide to match it. Okay, just about 2 or 3 more seconds. All right, I will close this and share the results with everybody. How much do you know about the Common Core State Standards?
Okay, it looks like 15% of our population here has more than average knowledge about the Common Core. 38 has average knowledge, and 41%, the highest rating, has only some knowledge, and 6% again has no knowledge.
That's great. Thanks again to everybody for responding. So I'm seeing a trend that about half of you are feeling like you have average knowledge or a little bit above, and about half of you are feeling like you have some knowledge or a little bit below for both the standards as well as the assessments. So our third question to kind of kick things off here is, so we've heard about the standards, we've heard about PARCC, and now the question a little bit more specific: how familiar are you with the PARCC model content frameworks? And once again, the same scale. 5 is you have it on your nightstand, and 1 is the what are you talking about, Doug? So I'll go ahead and share this poll with you. And another 30 seconds. And while you're all responding to this one, I wanted to respond to one of the questions that I saw come up in the questions bar, which is, how are we going to be able to get access to the PowerPoint slides? And Honor, do you want to respond to that?
Sure, Doug. We will, of course, have copies available on our website. And also, Doug, I believe you've sent that to us. We'll be posting it on our website under the webinar thing, in addition to having this session recorded.
Okay, great, thanks. So just another couple seconds then on the poll. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close that and share the results with everybody.
Okay, in this one, it looks like 58% have no knowledge at all, 31% have some knowledge, and 8% have average, and then 2% is more than average. Very
well,
different.
That's great news, because it means we're going to have a very nice conversation today, because the bulk of it is actually focused on the content frameworks. So I'm glad that we were able to find out where folks are, and I'll go ahead and continue on with the presentation then. Whenever I talk about PARCC, whenever I talk about the content frameworks, I always start by talking about the Common Core State Standards, because really PARCC and the content frameworks, which are derived from the standards, both are really implementation behaviors or implementation projects around the Common Core State Standards themselves. And as I think at least half of you, maybe even 3/4 of you, based on the results, know these standards are different. They have higher expectations for kids. They were created by states. And I think the reason that I personally find them so compelling is because I think they really do embody the aspirations that we have for all kids, that when they leave our school systems, they are ready to do what they care about doing the most. And the standards provide that content background to help them get there. So as we move forward, I just think it's important to keep that in mind. Many of you have probably seen this map before. These are all the states who have adopted the Common Core State Standards, 46 states plus the District of Columbia. You can see Alaska, Texas, Nebraska, and Virginia are the states that have not adopted it, but I can tell you that in each one of those states, they're paying very close attention to what's going on with the standards and working hard to make sure that their own standards are also college and career ready. I mentioned a moment ago that the standards do represent some pretty significant shifts in what we have expected with students in the past, and this particular slide shares what the three main shifts in each content area are. In ELA literacy, probably the most significant shift among the three is this first one, which is that there is much more emphasis placed on content-rich nonfiction and informational text than we have seen in previous sets of standards. In fact, when you get a chance to read the content frameworks for ELA literacy, you'll see that there, and this is in the standards as well, a recommendation of at least 50% of what kids read in the early grades, grades 3 through 5, in fact, are focused on informational nonfiction text. That reading and writing is grounded in evidence from the text, so it's not how a student feels about what they read. Their responses are based on what they read, and evidence in their responses is drawn from the text itself. And then finally, the third major shift is that there's much more emphasis placed on academic vocabulary in the ELA literacy standards than in many previous sets of standards. So it's not just the content vocabulary that students are learning when they read, but academic vocabulary, things like evaluate and synthesize, and really being able to dig into the learning around the ELA literacy, not just vocabulary of the content itself. In mathematics, the three big shifts are focus, coherence, and rigor. Focus is really, I like to talk about focus using the metaphor of the power of the eraser. That there are a lot of things that teachers have been asked to teach in mathematics across all grades that simply aren't necessary for college and career readiness, and the standards have gone a long way to focus on the mathematics that is most important for students to be ready for college and career. And I think this is from an instructional leadership perspective. If I were still working in the schoolhouse, this is something I'd be paying very close attention to, making sure that teachers are focusing on the major work of the grade. And I'll talk a little bit more about what that looks like in the elementary grades shortly. Coherence is the second major shift, right? It's thinking across grades as well as linking major topics within grades. And really what this refers to is the very logical and reasonable progression from one grade to the next of the mathematics content that you'll see in the standards. But more than that, the standards were constructed very carefully so that content within a grade could build on itself. So you could make connections, for example, between fractions and measurement and geometry in some of the earlier grades. And then finally, rigor, which really talks about, fluency we know is important, that, students are able to be fluent in the areas that the standards call for. It's only 12 times across the entire set of standards. But that they're also able to apply their understanding and demonstrate a deep conceptual understanding of the content itself. So it's the three legs of that stool that really focus on the fluency, the application of content, as well as deep conceptual understanding. The standards strive very hard to ensure that students have the opportunity to understand. So based on the standards, two consortia of states applied for Race to the Top funds to create assessments that were based on the Common Core State Standard. And one of those two consortia is PARCC, the Partnership for the Assessment of Readiness of College and Careers. And you'll see in this map the 24 states that make up PARCC. The dark blue states are referred to as governing board states, and the light blue states are participating. And the difference between governing and participating is simply that the governing states are the states that are making all of the decisions, right? The commissioners and assessment directors and are sitting at the table and deciding which vendors will be used for the creation of items, for example. They're making decisions about the assessment design itself. And the participating states are providing input, but are not sitting at the table when the decisions get made. You'll see the two states are circled. Massachusetts is circled because the Commissioner of Education of Massachusetts, Mitchell Chester, is the chair of the governing board, which is made up of the chiefs of all the governing states. And Florida is circled because it is the fiscal agent for PARCC, and that means that all funds flow through Florida. And with that, there comes some important transparency requirements for the work that we do. For example, our webinar today is being recorded and made widely available so that everybody has access to the work that's going on inside of PARCC. You'll see the Achieve logo there on the right-hand side, and that's because Achieve is serving as the project management partner for the 24-state consortium. Achieve does not develop tests. We don't develop items. What we do is help the states get their work done efficiently and effectively, making sure that we're able to create a next generation assessment for the states in the consortium. This is the assessment design slide, and I think it's coming up for you right now. Watching the little bar tick away. Many of you, I hope, saw this when I was out in Seattle doing the presentation at the annual conference. But for many of you, this might be new information, so let me just take a moment to walk through it. What you'll see here are 5 different assessment components for ELA literacy and 4 components for mathematics. That speaking and listening assessment at the bottom of the page is only for, obviously, ELA literacy. The 2 components on the left-hand side look a little different because they're actually optional components. States are not required to give these. Some states may choose to do so after we've had a chance to try them out for a few years, but at this point, those 2 assessments are optional. Some states may request, that districts and teachers within the districts give those assessments. But how students do on those assessments will not be part of their summative score at the end of the year. Right now, most states in the consortium are giving 1 assessment at the end of the year. Some states are giving 2. And what PARCC has created here is a suite of assessments that we hope will provide a very comprehensive picture of how students are doing. Now, when I put my principal hat back on, I look at that and think, wow, really? That seems like a lot of testing to me. And it's actually why I started by talking about those first 2 assessments as optional. But moreover, we do know that a lot of school districts are giving off-the-shelf interim assessments and benchmark assessments. And the hope is actually that the PARCC assessments will be able to replace many of those. So in fact, there would be a net reduction in the amount of testing that happens over the course of the school year. So let me talk about each one of these just a little bit. The first assessment is a diagnostic assessment, which is intended to be given, really any time in the beginning, first half, first 2/3 of the school year, to get a lot more information about where students are at a particular point in time with respect to the content that they understand. So it will focus on skills to inform both instruction as well as supports and professional development. So we really think this is where a lot of data, very useful data to support instruction, is going to be generated. We all know that most assessments right now, if we ever see data, we see it in August or September. And it's not very helpful to us with respect to instruction. But the diagnostic assessment, as well as the mid-year assessment, will provide much more timely information so that both you all as instructional leaders and your teachers can take action during the school year in supporting students and engaging in professional development as necessary. The mid-year assessment then actually is going to look an awful lot like the performance-based assessment. And it will focus on some of the harder to assess standards in some cases, and it will also very much focus on performance-based tasks. Students will be doing some writing. Students will be applying their mathematical knowledge in application situations. So it's really intended to get at students' deeper understanding of the standards. The performance-based assessment will look very similar to the mid-year assessment, as I just said, but in this case, the performance-based assessment, along with the end-of-year assessment, will combine. Those 2 components will combine. to create the student summative score. Again, the performance-based assessment is going to focus on extended tasks. Writing, again, will be a piece of this. Making sure that students, again, can apply their mathematical knowledge will be incorporated into this assessment. And then the end-of-year assessment, which will be given as close to the end of the year as possible, will be machines. They will contain all machine scoreable items, which I do not want you to interpret as fill in the bubble, the kinds of assessments we have right now. Because we'll be delivering these assessments via computer, we actually see a lot of potential to create very interesting assessment items that are still machine scoreable, right? To still get a student's mathematical conceptual understanding, that still give students an opportunity to do a little bit of writing on machine scoreable assessments. So these are things that we're trying to make sure are part of the final two components, so that the data that's generated from them is reliable and is valid, so that as we're looking at the data, we can trust the numbers that we're looking at. The speaking and listening assessment is intended to be locally scored. It's non-summative, which means it does not go into a student's overall score for the year, but it is required that all students will need to engage in the speaking and listening assessment. So that's the assessment design in kind of a nutshell. I hope that was helpful to you. We'll take a look at questions a little bit later on if any arose for you during that portion. But I want to make sure also that we understand that PARCC is more than just an assessment system. In fact, the supplemental budget from the U.S. Department of Education to fund the PARCC Assessment Consortium focuses primarily on K12 educators, which includes teachers as well as administrators. And there are four main areas of K12 educator engagement that we're working on in the consortium. The first is around instructional tools to support implementation. The second is around professional development modules, so people know how to give the assessments, and I think maybe even more importantly, they know what to, they have an understanding of how to work with the data that comes out of those assessments. Again, to support instruction within that school year for those first two components in particular. So I think I just said timely student achievement data, being able to get that data to you quickly. And then finally, the educator-led trainings, or what we refer to as the educator leader cadres. And this is a project to bring together 24 educators per state over the remainder of the grant period, so through fall 2014, to learn an awful lot more, to go very deep on the PARCC assessment system as well as the Common Core State Standards, so they can become in-state resources across the consortium and actually help others become equally knowledgeable about the standards in the assessments. Of all of these four things, I actually only have time to talk about one of them, and that is the instructional tools to support implementation. And within that that group of projects, I really only have time to talk about one. and I chuckle a little bit because I think we're going to need to make sure we have some more webinars together so we can dig into some of these other areas more closely. But the one that I want to talk about for the remainder of our time today is actually the PARCC model content frameworks. And these content frameworks were designed with two purposes in mind. But let me pause before I share those purposes. Many of you, I think, are probably familiar with the phrase curriculum framework. And we refer to these documents as content frameworks because they, in fact, really are not curriculum. They really are an analysis of the standards themselves. So we stay very focused on the content and stay away from curricular efforts there. And so their two purposes are to support implementation of the Common Core State Standards and also to inform development of the assessment itself through item specifications and blueprints that go into making up the assessment. The audience was primarily intended to be state and local curriculum directors, so they have a good understanding of the standards. But as a result of the public feedback that we got, we realized, we were missing the boat on that. And so we actually rewrote the framework so that they would also be accessible to teachers and building administrators, the instructional leaders, you all. And At the end, I'll talk a little bit about a project we have underway to make them even more accessible. But for the time being, let me stick with what we have in front of us. So let me first talk about mathematics, and then I'll talk about ELA literacy. The mathematics content frameworks were developed through a state-led process that involved a number of people from across the PARCC states. You can see all of their names there. I'm not going to read through each one of them, but if you're from, I encourage you to find the person in your state who helped participate in the development of these, because they'll be a good resource to you if you want to learn more about the content frameworks. The development process included 3 rounds of feedback, and the final round of feedback was a public review period, which solicited nearly 1,000 individual comments from K12 educators, principals, superintendents. We even had one student respond to it, which I'm sure you can imagine. I read very closely a student's response. Very thoughtful student, actually. Really enjoyed reading the feedback, and all of that feedback together really helped us make sure that the frameworks were both more precise as well as more accessible.
We also have 2 written-in questions. The first says, computer skills. How are young students able to type on computers for short or extended responses?
So the great question. The PARCC proposal actually indicates that 3rd through 5th graders would respond via paper and pencil. There is quite a bit of conversation going on within the PARCC research group about just exactly what we want to be doing with students in those grade levels. The research continues. I don't have a specific answer for you right now, other than to say that most of the conversation has been around helping 3rd through 5th graders respond via paper and pencil. The assessment would still be delivered via the computer, but the response method may very well be paper and pencil.
Great. Okay.
I just want to make sure for 3rd through 5th graders. Yeah.
We have another question written in that says, some districts will have issues with technology. How will states ensure that schools will be able to handle the tech part for the PARCC tests?
Yeah, it's a wonderful question. And I'm actually going to try to do a sleight of PowerPoint here as opposed to a sleight of hand. Let's see, does this slide come up for everybody on technology? Good, it does. So I was anticipating this question and actually pulled this slide up. There are a few different things going on with respect to technology in PARCC. One of them is this, which are the preliminary technology specifications. And you'll notice that we're taking a device-agnostic approach to this. Instead, really, right now, focusing on the kind of hardware capabilities that computers will need to have in order to deliver the assessment system. So the processor speed, the amount of random access memory, the amount of available storage, screen resolution, and screen size, which is the 10-inch class. And 10-inch class means that it ranges from about 9.5 inches to 10.5 inches. So it's all fine and good to know what the technology specifications are, but I heard the question actually is, what are states going to do to make sure that schools have the technological support that they need? And while I don't have slides prepared for this right now, I can talk about the technology readiness tool that actually PARCC and Smarter Balance, the other assessment consortium, have cooperated together in developing. And this is a tool that it's a technology-based tool that is going to actually survey every school in every PARCC state as well as every Smarter Balance state to find out what the current state of technology is in those buildings and where they may need more support. There are going to be a total of, I think, 3 rounds of survey being done. Much of it is automated, but as we go further into the survey process, some of it will also require some human response. But it really seeks to find out, how many computers do you have in your building? How many of them have the processor speed that's necessary? How many of them have the display, the screen size that's necessary? What is your broadband capability? And having that information is the first step that everybody in the state needs to have in order to start making good decisions about technology. So the state will share that information. Districts will have access to that information. I believe schools will have access to that information. And we're trying to do it as soon as possible. In fact, the first survey, I think, has already occurred. It occurred this spring. And so we're already getting some data in. I don't think it's in a place yet where it's cleaned up enough to share, but we are getting some early data in to find out what the state of affairs is around technology so that, again, as soon as possible, districts and states and schools can be making good decisions around technology issues. I hope that answered that question. Are there others?
We have some other questions written in. Sandra Winters asked, what is the difference between PARCC and Smarter Balance?
There are two differences, Sandra. One difference is the states, right? Smarter Balance has a different set of states. We share some states, those participating states in particular, but they have a different set of governing states and a different fiscal agent. They were awarded the same amount of money as PARCC to create an assessment system. But the two primary differences between PARCC and Smarter Balance are first that the Smarter Balanced is going to create a computer adaptive test at the item level, which means that if a student gets an answer right, they get one type of question. If they get the answer wrong, they get a different type of question. And PARCC is creating what's referred to as a fixed form test. So all students will see the same questions, and we're doing that because we want to make sure that we're communicating the same expectations to all students. There's some real strength to the computer adaptive test too, but PARCC has chosen to go with the fixed form test again for that fairness issue. The second difference really actually exists in high school. I mean, we also have differences in the number of assessments that we're making available to students over the course of the year, but I think that's a lesser difference than the difference in high school, where PARCC is creating end-of-course assessments for each each grades 9, 10, and 11 for both math and English language arts and literacy. And then also Smarter Balanced is only creating one assessment for high school. So I would say those are the two big differences. What they have in common is they're both aligned to the Common Core state standards. They both are going to be computer delivered. They are both going to generate good data. So I think they probably have as much in common as they have in different.
Wonderful. We have quite a few more questions. Why don't we just take one or two more? Does that sound good before we begin again?
I think so. I want to make sure we get to the content frameworks because I think everybody will find those, well, I hope everybody will find those to be very useful.
Okay, well, if we don't get to your question right now, we'll pick it up at our next stop, okay? So I want one more. Jerry Stewart asked the question, with the use of computer assessment, how important will be keyboarding?
I don't have an answer for you yet, Jerry. I've written your question down, though, because I think PARCC needs to provide you an answer to that. Yeah, I'm not even going to riff on it right now. I mean, obviously, particularly when responses are computer-based, starting in the 6th grade, students may need to be able to use a keyboard. There are still several technology issues that PARCC is working through right now, and we're trying to get resolved within the next several months so that we can be very clear to the states and districts and schools. But as of right now, I'm sorry, I don't have an answer for you.
So let me give you a different one then. Pamela Paget asks, if PARCC assessments start at grades 3, how will this impact the K2 levels?
So this is one of the things I wasn't able to talk about among the instructional supports tools. PARCC is going to be developing optional K2 formative assessments. And we're doing that because we still think it's important to know how kids are doing in the early grades in K2. And so teachers have a good understanding of where kids are in their understanding. But PARCC was not funded to create summative assessments in grades K through 2, just to create summative assessments in grades 3 through 5, or excuse me, 3 through 11. So we are planning to create the K2 formative assessments. and that work is set to begin later this fall.